Step number 26 is going to be pretty simple. We're going to install the steering linkage to the steering and also mount it to our servo. So I think probably the easiest way is going to be to mount the end to the steering up front to start. If you take your wheels and you turn them, you're going to expose the area here on the arm where the linkage is going to attach. Let's go ahead and make sure that your linkage is going the right way to fit onto the servo. We'll slide that through and we'll line up the arm on the bottom of the linkage, so the linkage is actually going to go on the top. And then we'll get the 15mm button head screw, drop it through, and thread it in. You have to push on it to create the thread so it'll thread in. It's not a threaded part. And put that in just till it touches. It's a long screw. There we go, just till it touches. And now we're going to mount the servo horn. You're going to want to make sure that your wheels are straight. And you can move those back and forth. We want to make sure that the arm goes on pretty much in a 90-degree angle here without being too far off. There we go. Now you're going to use the screw that came with your servo, if I can find it here, and mount the horn onto your servo. Later on we're going to come back and visit this because when we plug in our electronics it might not be centered and we may have to adjust one or two teeth over on the servo. Before I took the servo out of the, or when I first took the servo out of the box, I made sure it was as centered as possible, but we'll deal with that later. So actually I didn't. I'm going to try to recenter the servo a little bit before we put it on. And how am I going to do that? I'm going to grab the Futaba servo horn here, which I think was 25. I'm going to mount it on here. There we go. I'm going to turn it all the way to one direction, go all the way to the other. That's a little bit too much, so I'm going to move the horn over by one. We want it to be as equal as possible in both directions. So that seems to be about where it's going to be. So I'm going to move the servo horn over to a 90 degrees, take this one off and put this one back on. There we go. Make sure the wheels are straight. Find where that slides on. There we go. Pretty interesting. We're going to have to do some adjusting on that. I'm watching the servo arm here, the linkage, hit the side of the servo before it's fully turned. So we're going to come back and visit that during setup and readjust which spline the servo horn is aligned to. But we're going to go ahead and put this back on, tighten it down. And we finished this particular step. And that's the steering. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get set up for the next step, and we'll be right back. For step number 27, we've zoomed back in here a little bit. The things that are going to be needed for this step are your radio. As far as the receivers go, whatever system you're using, that's for you to decide. We're using a Spectrum radio here. You're going to double tape your radio down into the radio box, which we're going to skip that step right now on mine. I don't know if this is actually the radio I'm going to be using in my final product or not, but it was handy, so we're going to use it. The other two things you're going to need are the two silicone gaskets. You have a larger one here that looks like this. You can see that there are 3 slits in there, and those are for wires to run through your radio box and to keep them watertight. The second one is going to be a smaller one, and that is for your receiver wire. We're going to slide this one over the receiver wire, the antenna, and it's going to seat down into the little hole here. You'll see it, it's about the same size, and you're going to want to leave a little bit of slack in there so you can move your radio around, and then go ahead and slide it in there until it's flush against the top. You're also going to need at this point your ESC, and we're going to, the ESC sits right on top here, so we're going to use a little bit of the wire here. Actually, let me get that down through. So we're going to have a little bit of wire lead here, and it's, so what we're going to do is to slip the servo wire onto here and go into the bottom position, or whichever position that you choose for it to go in. But we're going to go with the bottom on this one, just like so. Make sure it's in the bottom slot, and then we're going to take the ESC wire and leave some slack on there. We can always pull a little bit more through later if we want and put that into the second slot, and then there's also a third slot in there that we can reserve for another channel of the radio for lighting or whatever we choose to put through there. And then we're going to slide that down into the little notch for it there. Make sure it slides all the way down in and seats down in there properly, just like so. Hope we left enough wire. Yeah, looks like we left enough for the ESC to sit on top of there properly. And this is what it's going to look like. And that is step number 27. Step number 28, we're going to mount the top of the radio box on, and a couple other little doodads as well. What you want to do is get the radio box top, and there is a gasket for it. And let's place that gasket down into the groove on the bottom side here, which may prove more difficult. Nope, actually not. Just get one little part started there and it presses right in. Just takes a little bit of persistence. We're getting it. There we go. You could probably put a little bit of shock oil on there, make it a little bit easier if you want everything to slide into place. But that's what it's going to look like when it's done. It should be even in that groove all the way around.